Coming up next, Dean Kamen has made a name as one of the biggest inventors in the past 50 years, from the Segway to iBot to the auto syringe. In 1989, he decided to give back with the launch of FIRST, an organization that promotes STEM education. Check out a clip from the work that he's been doing there with the FIRST robotics competition, and then we'll be back to interview Dean.
There's nothing better than seeing your robot on the field playing for the first time. They're all there like, is it gonna work? Is it gonna work? And then when it works, it's the best feeling ever.
Throughout each of our programs, students embrace FIRST's core values.
Discovery, innovation,
impact,
Inclusion,
teamwork.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for TC Sessions Robotics. My name is Brian Heater. I am the hardware editor at TechCrunch, and I am extremely excited to be sitting here virtually with our guest. Dean Kamen needs no introduction, but I'm going to do a quick one anyway. He's an inventor who holds more than 1,000 patents. His projects include the Segway, iBot, and the auto syringe insulin pump. He also co-founded FIRST, an education initiative behind, among other things, the FIRST robotics competition and FIRST LEGO League Challenge. Dean, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So as I noted in the intro, you've been an inventor for several decades now. I'm curious how, if at all, your work has been impacted by the pandemic.
So everything we're doing has been accelerated by the pandemic because almost everything we do is healthcare related. In dialysis, for instance, that population has been absolutely decimated by this. They're already fragile. They have to go, in many cases, to a collective place to get their therapies. We've been working on ways to give patients home self-administered dialysis. So you can imagine the pressure went up on that. We are working on so many other medical products, including a way to self-administer a vaccine without needles, without syringes, to go intradermally. And again, as you can imagine, the pressure's up to finish that. Our iBots, everything we're doing, our other drug delivery systems have been going crazy.
That's got to be a hard balance to strike, that everything is accelerated, but they're, especially in the early days of all of this, I assume you had to move a lot of your work remotely. Has that been a challenge, that remote collaboration?
So we have two kinds of people at DECA. Of about the nearly 900 technical and engineering people I have, probably about a third are essentially sitting at terminals, whether they're doing AI or writing code for controls or user interfaces. About a third of them can work remotely, can come in only when they need to interface. But about a third of them are in a machine shop, making tools, making molds, making parts. And about another third are in clean rooms, assembling things where they're side by side, making these life-saving technologies, and they've got to be available. So we spread people out. We put people on shifts that schedule them throughout the 24-hour period and the 7-day week to try to keep the densities down. We have enormously cooperative, enthusiastic people that understand the needed balance for safety, but the critical reasons to keep moving forward. And we've done pretty well with that.
So more broadly, do you see the pandemic playing a profound role in technological innovation generally?
I think if there is any living demonstration over the last couple of years for the entire global community to understand how critical it is to accelerate the pace of innovation, it's the pandemic. I just came back from Israel last week, where I watched the president of the Technion, who says, we're the MIT of Israel, present to the founder, the chairman and CEO of Pfizer, their recognition, basically their Man of the Year award, to Albert Bourla, because in about a year, his company created and made billions of doses of a vaccine that typically, until recently, would take 14 or 15 years to develop, and even longer to go through the approval process and go into high volume manufacturing. Now, it wasn't that they started from scratch, but as famously Isaac Newton said, I can see so far because I stand on the shoulders of giants. I think the entire pharmaceutical industry is now standing on the shoulders of giants of the last 100 years, but still the demonstration that when properly focused, we can use technologies literally to save a global population should be a message to everybody, particularly kids, about where they ought to put their attention.
Yeah, I think there's probably an important message here as well about being prepared for these sorts of things and not just reacting to them when they happen. I mean, obviously, the reason why a lot of the vaccines rolled out as quickly as they did was because all of these firms were doing a lot of this research prior to the pandemic actually hitting.
Well, I mean, again, to quote Albert Einstein, smart people solve problems, geniuses prevent them. And I think the clinical community, the technical community that's really, really sharp, that has foresight and vision, has been looking at the kinds of problems that could literally destroy life as we know it. And they've been trying to get ahead of it with better technical solutions in every field, whether it's energy, healthcare, cybersecurity, you name it. The geniuses are on it.
So you announced your work with Army several years ago, and I think certainly this is what we would consider a moonshot. There were some folks out there who had some doubts about regenerative medicine generally. How has that work been progressing?
That work is going phenomenally well. Just a few weeks ago, on stage in Southern California, two of the superstar members of Army, by the way, ARMI, Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute, now as a not-for-profit, it's a coalition I put together like I built first. It has 186 members, including most of the world-class, med schools and companies that are involved in just developing innovations in medical products. But a couple of weeks ago, on stage in Southern California, CNN had Sanjay Gupta bringing together, it took him a year to do it, all the people that are on the cutting edge of regenerative medicine. And two of the people that presented, one was Doris Taylor, who moved up here from where she spent more than a decade in Texas at the Texas Heart Institute. She gets on stage with a beaker, and in the beaker is a miniature pediatric scale beating heart that was manufactured. Induced pluripotent stem cells were put into a scaffold of a pre-existing organ. And within an hour of that presentation, Martine Rothblatt, the founder and chairman of United Therapeutics, is on stage, and they roll out from backstage up to her a box, and almost surrealistically lit from the top of the box, a panel opens, and what emerges out of the top of this platform is a completely functioning, it's a scaffold of a human lung that was entirely printed at the smallest scale any printer has ever operated. And she has been, in the last couple of months, able to keep a couple of humans alive under special permission, because these people are really, at the end of life. But she's done some extraordinary work there. But I would say, as she said from the stage, by the end of this decade, it will be very realistic for humans to show up at a medical institution and have installed in them a replacement human organ. So instead of treating people for chronic conditions like dialysis will give you a new kidney, or insulin pumps will give you a new pancreas. So all my current businesses are going to be wiped out by the ability to cure these diseases instead of treating them. But as I've told people for decades, you can't stop innovation. You have a choice. You can be on that innovation bus, or you can be under it. And I want to be the one that puts myself out of all my current businesses.
So in a weird way, if all of these businesses go out of business, then this has kind of been a net positive, I guess, at least for, humanity generally.
Oh, I think the skeptics and the cynics that are always, woe is me, the sky is falling, healthcare costs are going to bankrupt the country, don't realize that because it's become that big an issue, innovation will take over. I'm sure 70, 80 years ago, after they made the first iron lungs, and people said, wow, now kids that have polio, which every year another million kids got polio, we're going to be wiped out. It takes half the people alive to take care of the other people that are going to be lying in these giant iron lungs that are breathing for them. You've probably seen those old pictures. It looks like you're lying, in a garbage can. First of all, who would want to live that way? But everybody predicted that, taking care of this population is going to wipe us out. That was probably in the 1920s. Nobody said, no, don't worry. In about 20 years, this guy named Jonas Salk will come along. He'll figure out how to scratch your skin, give you this vaccine, and for a couple of bucks, not only will you never need this treatment, no, this disease will go away. The average millennial has never heard of polio. They don't worry about it. Your grandparents were scared to death of that. Well, these same people that think all these chronic conditions that are going to wipe out our budget and make our lives extended but miserable, they don't realize if we start making replacement organs, the quality of life of people when you give them their new organ and they don't need to spend every other day lying on a dialysis machine, their quality of life will go up. But once they have that new organ, we're going to save $100,000 or $200,000 per year per patient. So I think you need to start recognizing that these innovations, while they're very expensive in today's dollars to create, are going to bend the cost curve, improve the quality of life, and sustain the future in a very, very positive way.
One of the reasons why we wanted to have you at this robotics event is the work that you've done with FIRST. It was primarily set up as extracurricular activities for students. What was the landscape like, and why was the organization necessary when you co-founded it?
Well, I'm an inventor, right? What do inventors do? We look at the same problems as everybody else and see them differently. And 30 some odd years ago, when I founded FIRST, my mom was a teacher. Everybody I knew back then and everybody I know today knows some teacher that changed their lives. But yet, conventional wisdom back then, and sadly even now, was we have an education crisis. And back then, the data showed, hey, we don't have any girls going into tech fields. We don't have many minorities going into tech fields. With the population changing, this country is going to fall so far behind the rest of the world in being competitive, being on the leading edge with our technologies. What will we do? And everybody decided it was an education problem. I said, you know what? Suddenly all the teachers in this country didn't become lazy or incompetent. It's not an education problem. It's a culture problem. By the 1960s and 70s, right after World War II, the greatest generation set up a country where their kids will have it all, and we do. And we invented things like leisure time. We invented all sorts of ways to convince kids life's supposed to be easy and fun. And we made superheroes out of Hollywood that come from the world of sports, the world of entertainment. We had the Super Bowl, we had the World Series, we have, you name it. And I said, hey, wait a minute. If in a free country you get the best of what you celebrate, and we now celebrate baseball isn't just a national pastime, it's an obsession. When you look at the world of sports and entertainment, they've got loads and loads of superheroes and role models for kids, particularly women and minorities in entertainment and sport. Well, if you get the best of what you celebrate, we better start celebrating science, technology, engineering, inventing. Let these kids start developing that muscle hanging between their ears. And if we can get kids excited about how accessible and rewarding and fun technology and mathematics and physics can be, we'll solve our problem of these shortages. We'll develop a generation of kids that really want to be, world leaders in tech. And this country always becomes a world leader in what we focus on. We're pretty good at entertainment. Hollywood still is a big export industry. We're pretty good at sports, but not so much because of these cultural things. So I formed an organization built around the sports model. That's why I called it FIRST, for inspiration and recognition of science and technology. The word education isn't in there. Education's not our problem. If kids showed up for school as passionate to get on a varsity FIRST team as a varsity soccer team, we'd all be happy. So I called it FIRST also because kids want to excel at sports. I've never seen a kid at a sporting event cheering, I want to be second. So I figured they want to take math, pass, fail. They don't want to take physics at all. What are they going to have for careers? The future's every major exciting career opportunity is going to require familiarity and comfort with technology. And some of the biggest and most exciting careers in industries that haven't even happened yet are going to require expertise in science, technology, engineering, and math. So I formed this organization to appeal not to the kids that are already lucky enough that they got on a professional, nerdy dad or mom. I wanted the whole population of the next generation to be as aware of how exciting the world of tech can be as the, frankly, elusive idea that they're really going to make money playing professional sports or being a big Hollywood star, because that's just not going to happen for well over 99% of them.
So there's a sense in which it almost had to be extracurricular and sort of taken out of the context of the classroom in order for it to be successful.
So kids won't go to class, or they'll take math, 45 minutes Thursday morning between phonics and spelling, 1 day a week for a few minutes, but they'll go after school for 3 hours every single day during this season to get better at football, or that season to get better at basketball. So I said, look, we're not competing for the hearts and minds of these kids with the science fair and the spelling bee. We're competing for the hearts and minds of these kids with the things that they invest all of their time and effort and energy and passion in. So let's use that model, make it aspirational, make it after school. Don't give them quizzes and tests, give them letters and trophies, and bring the school band and bring the mascots and bring, we said we're competing for the hearts and minds of kids. We know what works. Let's go do it. And now with 80 some odd thousand schools, 200,000 volunteer superstar mentors from all our 3,700 industry sponsors. We gave out something like $80 million in scholarships at the championship that we did in Houston at the end of April. We had, like 50,000 people show up for that. It's working. We are competing for the hearts and minds, particularly of the kids that most need to see this pathway to successful careers and successful lives, and to support this country as a world leader.
The last time we spoke, we talked a little bit about automation and job loss, and I know that that's something that you've been thinking about and have very strong opinions on. You noted at the time that these technologies will ultimately create more jobs over time. But one thing that I've been really curious about and is how we can actually help the workers who lose blue-collar jobs in the short term.
So look, every new technology always displaces something that it does better, or things we didn't want to do. Otherwise, that new technology wouldn't be adopted. But today, in the same way there are people against vaccines for some reason, I'm glad my grandparents let me take that polio vaccine. And there are people against technology. There's this just general level of skepticism about everything new and different, and people that are claiming that robots are going to put people out of work and artificial intelligence is bad, and that you talk to them and they don't understand anything. For instance, the only thing wrong with that concept, artificial intelligence, is it's not artificial and it's not intelligent. Other than that, it's a really good name for that. But if you said to somebody, look, it's not artificial at all, any more than your calculator that can multiply 7-digit numbers or find the square root of 14-digit. That's not because there's a little mathematician in there. There's an algorithm. There's a piece of hardware. There's very well understood processes going on. And when the Industrial Revolution started and we made steam engines, we didn't call it artificial muscle. We said, no, we made an engine and it can dig a hole that 100 people couldn't do in a day. But all the ditch diggers in the world didn't say, no, I want to unionize and be against the Industrial Revolution and steam shovels. They probably thought, I'd rather be sitting on that machine driving it, doing 100 times as much work as I could do before, instead of backbreaking work that I'll have to end when I'm 20 years old. But they didn't sit there and say, but if it does as much work as 100 people, we're all going to be out of business except 1 out of 100. Because people recognize that when you didn't have the power to do that, you built very, very small houses with very, very small holes under them. And you didn't build super highways that are 8 lanes wide across the country. Once we have a new technology, it creates new opportunities to dramatically expand what we all do. So yes, robots will be used to eliminate jobs so humans won't have to jump into that cesspool or into that hazardous waste site or into that burning building. We will use robots to replace people at things that are dangerous or that people don't want to do. But who's going to design and build those robots? Who's going to operate those robots? I mean, right now, there are probably more people designing and building and driving bulldozers than there ever were ditch diggers. And you can't find a single example for me of any industry that has flourished that didn't create way more jobs than the jobs it eliminated. And in every case, it eliminated jobs that people didn't want to do and gave people better careers and more exciting futures. And we are just at the beginning edge of another industrial revolution that will be bigger in some ways than the one that brought us steam power to replace our muscles. We are bringing in power through things like machine learning and what we call artificial intelligence to expand the capability of people to do more. But we're not going to eliminate the jobs and have people unemployed. We're going to eliminate the drudgery and the repetitive stuff and give people exciting opportunities to create whole new products and whole new industries that we weren't thinking about when we started this process.
When the Segway was first introduced, a lot of the contemporary media coverage focused on this idea of reinventing streets and sidewalks. You know, 20 odd years later, I'm curious what roles you think technology will ultimately play in forming the cities of the future.
So when I started with that one, I said, we've got to get electrification. You don't want to be sitting, sucking up the exhaust of some 4,000-pound vehicle creeping along at 3 miles an hour in a city. Your cars are fine on the highway, but let's make small, quiet, efficient ways for people to do the last mile. By the way, if you look around now, in every city, there are tens of millions of little electric scooters running around. And oh, by the way, the idea that we're going to electrify all the cars 20 years ago, people laughed at that concept. And I wouldn't want to be somebody today that's designing, you know, the next generation of 8-cylinder overhead cam fuel injected anything, because you might as well go make buggy whips. So the world is moving towards electric technologies for transportation, and the world is going to continue to move towards smaller, more efficient personal mobility devices in cities and for pedestrian environments. And I think it's inevitable and it's exciting.
You've always struck me as somebody who's really focused on the really big ideas, but you know, obviously a lot of times with these really big ideas come big failures. I'm curious, over the years, what lessons you've learned from your own failures.
You don't have enough time to listen to all the lessons I've learned from all of my failures.
Give me about 4 minutes worth and we'll be good.
I would say the biggest thing you learn from a failure is that while that particular approach to the problem might not have worked, typically because you learn something that nature is cruel, or you know, maybe it's subtle. But the second law of thermodynamics never lets you cut corners. Newton's laws, they're always there. What I've learned from failure is go back and decide, was the fundamental goal wrong? That's why it failed. You succeeded, but nobody needs this. Or was the available technology and your systems integration and application of it wrong? In which case you've now learned enough, go try again, go use a different approach. So what I've learned from failures is pick yourself up, try again using a different approach. And it really doesn't matter how many times you fall down. If you fall down 5 times, but you stand up 6, it's okay. And in the end, you only need a win every once in a while to keep your confidence up and hopefully to give you the resources to keep going, even though inevitably you'll have failures. Let the projects fail. Don't let the people fail. Be responsible about making sure that you can keep the people going. I mean, people ask me, what are the biggest achievements in the aerospace industry since the Wright brothers? And you could say it's engines and it's rockets. I think one of the big inventions that made the aerospace industry grow as fast as it did is the invention of the parachute. As long as you have a way to recover from failures, let that design that didn't work down. Save the people. And if you can then take risks that are reasonable and prudent and let systems fail, but let people learn from them and move on, everybody will be happy, and life will be a set of innovations that for the foreseeable future will always make life for the next generation better than it was in ours. And that should be all of our goal.
And it sounds like, and this brings us nicely back to the beginning of the conversation, it sounds like part of being an innovator is being ready for the fact that at some point some new technology is going to eclipse you, and being prepared for that as well.
I think you have to be more than prepared for it. You have to be confident it will happen, and you have to celebrate it. I celebrate it more when it's me that obsoleted the last thing I did, but if somebody else can obsolete it And if I get to a point where I need a better clinical solution than a dialysis machine or an insulin pump, if I can get to a place where somebody else's technology gave me a new organ or a prosthetic limb or something I need to have a better quality of life, I will thank that person. And I hope I will return that favor by giving them something of value that we invented.
So you're going to hate me for giving this big question with 1 minute left, but as you look at a lot of the innovations that are over the horizon, aside from the work that you're doing, what most excites you?
That's a tough one, because at the rate that we're seeing technologies accelerate, the idea that some people are already not comfortable not being able to keep up with what are the hopes and the intended consequences, but being afraid of the unintended consequences. As all of this is happening faster, it is getting harder and harder to predict at all what will be the next big industry or what will be the next big challenge. So that's why I say the most important thing we can do is take all the kids in this generation and give them the best possible background and experience and the tools to be adaptive, to learn how to deploy technologies in a meaningful way. That's why I think FIRST is just a microcosm of the real world of innovation. We give them a kit of parts and we say, you've only got 6 weeks. Do what an engineer would do if you had a career. And I think they learn from that, they get excited by that, and they're going to be prepared for a future with unlimited opportunities that they got to deal with.
Great, Dean. We are unfortunately at time, but thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.